new form of medicine is taking shape, extracted from the hearts of our forests, lakes, and mountains. Many of us instinctively know that taking a walk in the woods, a stroll in the park, or touching the soil improves our well-being, stimulates our creativity, and favors a calm disposition. But is it just an intuition? Does nature have measurable effects on our bodies, our emotions, or our brains? Until recently, scientific proof to back up this intuition had been lacking. But over the last 20 years, some of the world's most pioneering researchers have made startling discoveries. They are in the middle of proving how spending time in nature, or even looking at it, stimulates our natural immune system and helps us battle stress, mental fatigue, depression, and could even make us happier. These major discoveries will revolutionize the way we approach health, medicine, and our relationship to the living world. As a kid, I used to spend hours in trees. I'm lucky to have made that my job. I'm a journalist who specializes in topics involving nature and ecology. 10 years ago, I wrote a book about my reconnection to nature. In the scope of my research, every person I met confirmed they felt better, more joyful, more creative, and happier when in nature. But when I asked them for tangible proof of these sensations or intuitions, they simply didn't have any. So I went searching for those who had studied the subject. I wanted to go beyond the simple affirmation that a walk in the forest is good for our health. The discoveries I made extended far beyond anything I could have ever imagined. My study started with an important question. Does time spent in nature have a scientifically measurable effect on our bodies? And if so, how does it affect our health? It was all the way across the world that I found the first elements of answer in Japan. Professor Lee is one of the first researchers to have analyzed the tree's ability to impact our immune systems.
Shirin-yoku uses the power of the forest in order to heal and prevent sickness. We can absorb these benefits through all 5 of our senses.
By connecting with nature, I'm hoping to reduce daily stress. That's why I come to the forest.
To encourage their people to enjoy the benefits of the forest, Japanese authorities have created about 60 certified Shirin-yoku sites, complete with available guides.
If you touch a tree, the tree will think it's being attacked. It thinks it's an insect or a woodpecker, so it produces certain substances to protect itself. But in essence, those substances are good for human beings. That's why we touch or kiss the tree, to stimulate it. After doing that, if we sit nearby for a moment, these therapeutic substances will be diffused by the tree.
In 2006, Professor Lee was the first scientist to prove that the aromatic substances produced by the trees activate the cells that protect our body's natural immune system.
The most important sense is smell, which detects phytoncides. Let me explain what a phytoncide is. It's a substance produced by the tree to protect itself against insects or bacteria. During my research, we were able to prove that phytoncides boost what we call natural killers, and this was confirmed in the lab. Natural killers are white cells, immune system cells. Natural killers are responsible for killing cancerous cells, so when it comes to our health, they're some of the most important cells. If someone does 3 days and 2 nights of Shirin-yoku, the activity of the natural killers expands. We've observed an increase in activity of 52%.
And the effects are lasting. Natural killer cells have been shown to be more active up to 30 days following a forest bath. This can even be prolonged further.
Now, I want you to slowly reopen your eyes.
If every month we spend 3 days and 2 nights in the forest, we could maintain elevated levels of natural killers, and that's the most powerful result I have found in my research.
Professor Lee wanted to learn if the immune effects brought on by the forest could be replicated in interior spaces. To find out, he tested the most powerful essential oils from trees known to impact our immunity.
This box contains essential oils. This is hinoki essential oil, very expensive and only found in Japan. This is another variety of hinoki, this one from Zayu. And we also have a vaporizer. You can use this in different places. For example, you could use it in a hotel or at home. It gets vaporized little by little, allowing you to practice Shirin-yoku in interior spaces. But let's not forget that even though you do have phytoncides in these essential oils, the benefits of Shirin-yoku are, above all, tied to the interactions of our 5 senses with nature.
The forest doesn't just affect our natural immune system, it also helps regulate our physiological parameters pertaining to relaxation and calmness. Professor Yoshifumi Miyazaki, a researcher at Chiba University in Tokyo, has been studying forest bathing for 25 years.
When we're in the forest, we calm down. We can see a reduction in cerebral activity as we predicted. The main idea behind Shirin-yoku is that the human body was made to live in nature.
The professor started his research to confirm his own intuition as a scientist. He developed brand new techniques that allowed him to evaluate in the field and in real time the effects of the forest on cerebral activity, the nervous system, and stress hormones. She is taking part in a study on the power of forest baths. Underneath her hat, electrodes measure the activity of a very specific part of her brain, the prefrontal cortex, our brain's learning and memorization center. What the scientists found was illuminating.
According to our research, cerebral activity is significantly reduced in the forest. In contrast, big cities cause a significant increase in brain activity.
The professor then evaluated the parasympathetic nervous system, which regulates the body's calmness and rest.
Our work shows that the parasympathetic activities of the autonomous nervous system increase by 50% compared to what happens in a city. We can hence conclude that the body relaxes when it's in the forest.
Finally, a saliva sample was taken from Lynn to measure cortisol levels, a hormone released by stress.
In the forest, cortisol levels are 12% lower than what we measured when she was sitting in the city.
Therefore, nature has a very real and rapid impact on our nervous system and our emotional state. Saying it affects our health is not just a theory. The results of Yoshifumi Miyazaki and his colleagues have been validated in more than 60 forests made up of hinoki cypress, Japanese pine, and cedar trees. These forests are now certified silvotherapy centers and protected from any destruction. In just a few decades, Japan has gone from a traditional to an artificial way of life that puts immense pressure on the Japanese people. In Tokyo, Shibuya is the world's busiest hub. The professor resumes his experiment. He's about to compare Lynn's physiologic results from the forest with the same set of data, this time gathered in the city. Lynn may seem calm, but inside everything has accelerated. Her body's natural alarm system has been activated, her cortisol levels rise, and her heartbeat increases dramatically.
Human beings have existed in natural environments for 7 million years. Our DNA has adapted to live that way. That's why man feels lost today. Man cannot survive this artificial age.
Professor Miyazaki believes that the path to the forests is the best way to prevent chronic illnesses linked to the stresses of ultra-fast urbanization.
I believe the most important benefits of the forest are its medically preventive effects.
Lynn's physiological data was then analyzed at the Center for Environment, Health, and Field Sciences at Chiba University in Tokyo. The Japanese scientist has a lab equipped with unique, state-of-the-art technology capable of measuring the therapeutic value of nature for each of our 5 senses. Finally, the professor also proved that a view of trees compared to an urban view rapidly reduces blood pressure.
We are more relaxed in the woods because the forest and man synchronize to one another. Our bodies are made to adapt to nature, so the purpose of Shirin-yoku is not to lower our physiological constants, but rather to get back to an equilibrium.
I really liked the idea of nature readjusting our stress-affected physiological settings and bringing them back to balanced levels. Such is the adjustment that brings us the calmness or vitality that are synonymous with well-being. But does nature also have an effect on our spirit? Does it regenerate us, similar to the way sleep does? And how does that affect our daily lives? This time, my research led me to Northern Europe, and more precisely, to Sweden. Terry Hartig is an environmental psychologist. He was one of the first researchers to seriously study the effects of nature on our cognitive functions. He was going to help me understand how nature helps us fight mental fatigue, stimulates our learning capacities, and renews our concentration levels.
Here in the north, we want to look at the white space. It's important for people to come out into the snow and to appreciate what the white landscape, the winter landscape has to offer us. This in some ways is a demanding place. It's cold out. You have to come prepared. But still, when you're prepared, you come here and it serves restoration. I can come here, I can feel calm, I can clear my mind, I can let my attention go to other things, I can enjoy the beauty of the place. I don't think so much about the day-to-day worries of work and private life. I can just appreciate this beautiful winter landscape.
Terry Hartig carries out his research in the psychology department at the University of Uppsala, Scandinavia's oldest university. After years of work, he has managed to develop a detailed scientific protocol that simulates work environments in order to explore how nature impacts our intellectual agility, speed of execution, concentration, and memory. The goal of these tests is to provoke intellectual fatigue in the subject and then observe how the natural environment allows her to restore her mental capacities. Julia needs to follow directions and ignore irrelevant information as fast as she can. After 25 minutes of intense concentration, Julia's vigilance starts to show signs of fatigue. She's starting to make mistakes. The young woman is then asked to walk for 30 minutes in nature to relax her mind. After her walk in the snow, Julia takes a meditative walk in the greenhouse next to the university. The greenhouse gives students access to a natural environment teeming with life, a perk for anyone living in a country where winter lasts almost half the year. Julia resumes her tests. Terry notes that she's making far fewer errors than before the walk, even on the most difficult exercises. He sees this as an important indicator of nature's restorative powers.
Now, we see over many experiments with different kinds of tests that nature promotes more restoration. People are regaining this ability to function effectively in a cognitive sense. Our thinking is that when people do have the ability to go regularly to natural environments, they can recover more quickly and completely from their efforts to meet everyday demands, and that this provides a buffer against poor mental and physical health.
I was starting to understand the incredible potential these discoveries could have on our daily lives, but I still needed to understand where this regenerative power was coming from. Terry, who led one of the first major studies on this very subject, involving researchers from 20 countries and thousands of trial subjects, had some initial findings to share.
Now, the interest in nature and health, of course, isn't new. People have been interested in this topic in a variety of ways. What is different now is that we see people training a wide variety of scientific methods on questions about nature and health. There is one theory that people have been working with for some decades now. It's one of the earlier theories in the research area. It's a theory of restorative environments. This theory specifies that when people are out in a natural environment, they can rely on an effortless form of attention. The authors of this theory, Stephen and Rachel Kaplan, refer to this effortless form of attention as fascination. That is, when people go out to a natural environment, they can let their attention go to scenery, features of the natural environment, or to processes like exploring that will engage attention without a person having to make an effort.
When we contemplate the beauty of natural living environments, our brain tunes to a certain wavelength that is not like that of a sleeping state, but more like an idle state, which allows the brain to purge itself of mental fatigue.
Today we're concerned that too many people are so disconnected from the natural environment that they don't know what is being lost. That is one of the things that motivates the research on nature and health, to try and help people appreciate the values of these experiences with the natural environment, these experiences of nature.
Nature resets our brains. Every one of us has the power to choose our favorite restorative environment, depending on which landscapes we prefer or the natural environment that's closest to where we live or work. But how does the brain perceive nature in comparison to the city? And how do these neurological effects impact the state of our mental health? To answer these questions, I went to Mannheim to meet Professor Meyer Lindenberg.
As neuroscientists, we think it is intrinsically interesting to understand the mechanism by which environmental exposure in the context that we're talking about here increases or decreases risk for mental health. That's a basic science question that only looking into the brain can answer.
Neuroscientist Andreas Meyer Lindenberg is the first scientist in the world to have identified the effects of nature on neurological function. In a study published in 2011 in the Nature journal, the professor identified a region of the brain that's only activated in situations of social stress tied to urban life. The amygdala, the brain section that detects fear.
What you see lighting up here is the brain structure that was related to living in a big city. That's a brain structure called amygdala. And what we found is that the activation of amygdala during social stress was dependent on the size of the city in which people lived. And it's shown here. If you live in a rural area, amygdala really didn't activate at all. If you were in a smaller city, a little bit, and if you were in a big city, it activated a lot. A hyperreactive amygdala is, we think, the brain mechanism that predisposes you to anxiety disorders and also to depression. And those are exactly the two groups of disorders that you find are increased in people who live in a big city. They're increased by around 40%, 30 to 40 to 50% worldwide.
Faced with ultra-fast rising rates of neurological disorders affecting anyone living in a big city, the newest challenge for researchers is to evaluate how the presence of urban nature could preventatively help us stabilize our moods and emotions. Professor Lindenberg is making good strides. He's carrying out a study that follows hundreds of voluntary participants over the course of a year using a mobile phone app and a motion sensor. Genia, a psychology student, takes part in the study 1 week per year. The goal is to correlate in real time her state of mind with her outings in green spaces.
See a very strong relationship between the amount of green space that you're exposed to and how good you feel and what that does to your brain. The ambition is to do primary prevention. We think that green space in cities is probably going to be an important component of making cities healthier, because you can't deconstruct the city and build it back up from the ground up, but you can distribute green space more widely and be sure that more people have access to it. Or if you're a city dweller and you want to do something about your mental health risk, you can also seek out green space.
Neuroscience offers precious new tools to study the connection between nature and health. I realized the importance of having a multifaceted perspective that taps into various scientific disciplines when considering public health. The question of nature's role in our physical and emotional balance is now being taken very seriously at some of the world's most prestigious universities. What was once considered only worthy of minor studies is now growing exponentially. In 1990, there were only 2 reference studies on the connection between nature and health. In 2015, there were 45, and in 2018, more than 350 were published. In 2015, a team from Stanford University was the first to conclude that nature reduces mental rumination, the root of depression.
Stanford University has a lot of expertise, many different professors and students studying the benefits of nature for a whole range of aspects of human well-being, of jobs and livelihoods and economic security, through to health. Disconnecting from nature has tremendous health risks. Among them are the rising rates of anxiety-related disorders, depression-related disorders, poor attention, sort of attention deficit, hyperactivity-related disorders, and other things that we see plenty of evidence of in schools and also in the workplace.
Along with Gregory Bratman, a specialist of environmental psychology, Gretchen Daly led the study in which for the first time nature emerged as an antidepressant.
For our study, we wanted to dig into one possible causal mechanism about why it is nature experience may or may not have affective or mood benefits.
The 2 researchers divided the participants in 2 groups. One group went walking in the noisiest streets of Palo Alto, while the other group walked in the nature surrounding the Stanford campus. Upon their return, the researchers compared their moods and their brain activity using functional MRI. The fact that the study combined neuroscience with classic field techniques taken from social sciences made it an international first of its kind.
What we found was that rumination decreased for the participants who were randomly assigned to a nature experience versus an urban experience. And what rumination means in psychology is something very specific. It's repetitive thought focused on negative aspects of the self, and it's associated with increased negative mood, and it can be a risk factor for the onset of depression in some people.
In a calming and welcoming natural setting, or when surrounded by living landscapes, our mental and emotional suffering is muted. That was a major discovery for the millions of people in the world who suffer from anxiety or depression, the illness of the century.
If I come out into nature, I may feel more connected to something bigger than myself. It may be simply a switching away of focus on myself that allows this rumination to decrease. Nature is disappearing off the face of the earth. We need to address the environmental justice aspect of these questions and these issues and make sure that there's equal access to these benefits.
There's an urgency. We're at a moment when the world is waking up to the vital importance of nature, seeing the tremendous loss of nature experience among people living in cities. And it's actually a tremendous moment when the science is coming along, providing the evidence that decision makers need for financial investments, meaningful action today, right in this moment when urbanization is accelerating beyond what anyone would have imagined.
To sum up what I had learned, Walking in nature reduces stress, reinforces our immunity, helps us face everyday challenges, improves our mood, and protects us against mental disorders and depression. And it's all free. It requires no medication and has no side effects. But what if you can't physically go into nature? If you have limited motion, are sick or weakened, for example? Is it possible that the mere view of nature also affects us? Roger Ulrich was the first to prove the positive impact of nature on hospitalized individuals in his study published in the prestigious Science Journal in 1984.
I wanted to see if exposure to nature, in contrast to exposure to built environments that lack nature, really had different effects in terms of the ability to either block or reduce recovery from stress or promote recovery from stress.
In his study, Roger compared post-operative recovery in two different patient groups at a hospital in Pennsylvania. One group had a window with a garden view, and the other group had a view of a plain brick wall.
And sure enough, at the end of a week, the health outcomes were different. Those with the window view of nature had better recovery outcomes. They spent somewhat less time in the hospital, almost a day. A big difference was that those who were exposed to nature and had this emotionally pleasant, calming distraction for hours each day experienced much less pain. They didn't need potent narcotic injections. They did take pain medication, but often it was weak pills. But that was a big difference. And many researchers, most of them from medicine, have shown subsequently, in many studies in recent years for that matter, that distraction with nature for hospital patients perceived pain levels and reduces intake of drugs. There's a strong case to be made that if the patient can go out or their stressed family can go out, it's better to be in nature and be in a real garden. This in turn means you have to rethink the architecture of hospitals. It seems to be a powerful welcoming element. You're not in this brutal institution of a hospital or a clinic. It's a place that cares, and the architecture is a lot softer.
These studies contributed to the creation of healing gardens in the United States, the UK, and Sweden. Roger Ulrich started the conversation between architects, landscapers, and healthcare professionals. Thanks to him, green architecture is forging a new path in big hospitals. The idea is to create environments where natural elements and gardens can become healthcare partners. One of the first French experiments to examine nature's therapeutic qualities took place at Pitié-Salpêtrière in Paris, a 30-hectare teaching hospital that sees some 20,000 people pass through every day. She has been living her dream since 1997, when she became a nurse gardener, helping children suffering from autism experience nature. It's here, in the small concrete backyard of the pediatric ward, that she created her first healing garden.
Gardening heals in and of itself, meaning that little by little, whether children, elders, or people with brain damage, I bring them into the garden, and I help them discover the benefits of gardening and the effect that it has on them. They start noticing that they feel better. That's what the elite garden is. It's a healing garden. The caregiver receives care by caring for the garden. Which boots do you want?
I don't want to.
You don't want to? We're going to water the plants with ombre. Come. Here, I'll help. The benefit of nature for those with autism begins with simply getting them outside. We find ourselves in a space that attracts them and gets them outside of themselves. The fact that there are familiar elements here, like water, like dirt, things they already know, that helps create a space that they basically understand. Another thing they find appealing is that they always end up finding something that surprises them. It's all alive and always changing or growing, so they understand that something's happening. Want to do it together? Wait, together. Every child is sensitive to an element, whether that's water, earth, air, the sun, or the wind. Put it all along here, like we did before. You can put more, everywhere, like this. To prolong that state of wonder, we have to create places like this one, where there's no fuss. We're really one with the earth and the dirt. It's very important for people with autism to be outside. It's an amazing benefit. Go on, hit it. Something happens in a garden, something that's hard to quantize on a report card or an evaluation saying, were they this or that? That's more difficult. It's the little gestures that matter.
Physical contact with the earth, plants, or animals helps us gently get back in touch with our sensory perception.
Children that struggle to express themselves or that are trapped inside themselves completely change in the garden. It brings out spontaneity, kindness, or things of that nature. If everyone did it, I honestly believe we would all feel better.
What Anne has brought to life in her small corner of the hospital, with little means but a lot of passion, should be duplicated in other establishments. Imagine if we had a network of green hospitals with healing gardens that were accessible to the sick, to their families, and their caregivers. At this stage of my research, I felt the need to take a step back so that I could better understand the powerful physical and emotional links that connect humanity to the natural elements. With a mix of fascination, fear, and attraction, our ancestors learned to respect nature, to admire it, to take refuge in it, and then to control it. He has dedicated the majority of his work to studying the relationship between man and his environment. He was going to explain the reasons why certain landscapes make us much happier than others. We met at his house in Louvain-la-Neuve.
There's a well-known American scientist named Edward Wilson. He was a professor at Harvard University. In the 80s, he had this idea he called the biophilia hypothesis. Basically, it states that man and woman have an innate affinity to the elements of nature. He explained this emotional affinity, this innate, non-acquired attachment with nature, by the fact that there's a sort of co-evolution between the culture of the hunter-gatherer and the genetic evolution of the human species. This is something that has been taking place for 350,000 successive generations. We're part of something much bigger than ourselves, which has its own dynamics and its own seasonal rhythms. We just contribute to it. And that's what generates that feeling we get when we feel like our life makes sense, that we're part of the flow. What's remarkable about our contact with nature is that it's extremely versatile. To some people, the thing that typically allows them to amplify their connection would be meditation or something calming, like slow walking, for example. To others, it's exercise or adventure, like going for a hike or a horseback ride in the forest. Each of us has to find their unique preference for how they like to interact with nature in a way that is most suited to their way of life, their preferences, their values, and even how they structure their day-to-day living.
He made me realize that nature is not just essential to our health, by getting closer to the thousands of other lives it shelters, by reconnecting with the seasons using a ritualized temporality, maybe we can seize our chance to belong to something bigger than ourselves again, where words are no longer the main way we express meaning. Everywhere in the world, our deep-rooted connection with nature is being lost. In barely one generation, Canada went from a rural nation to an urban country, where healthcare professionals are sounding the alarm on rising obesity, hyperactivity, and cardiovascular disease. But is there such a thing as an ideal distance from nature? What are the criteria for nature to benefit our health? And how close can we really bring the forest to our cities? He thinks the answer will come from the forests themselves. Together with his students, he's building the first evaluation chart for the benefits of urban forests here in Stanley Park, a 44-hectare green heart in the very center of Vancouver.
So today we're actually out here to do what we call an experience value mapping, where we go into a forest and see what kind of experiences does the forest or the park offer to us. And it could really change from one part of the park to another, where you feel you're moving into a different room, as it were. So from maybe a very busy social area, you move to an area where there's a lot of reclusiveness almost, and serenity, and where you really can feel, now I'm really restoring myself. And we need both. We need both the social and the more, natural experience.
Cecil Cronet-Jack's work is based on his understanding of holistic health. In addition to physical and mental health, he adds another key element, socio-cultural relations. His students are pulling data pertaining to noise level, variety of tree species in the area, but also playground availability for children and gathering areas designed for socializing with friends or family.
Yeah, it's almost like a savanna landscape, huh? Yeah. Which we know, of course, is very important for health. People like savanna. It's interesting that, wherever you go in the world, people have the same feeling with savanna. So everybody likes savanna landscape. That's why we have these parks that look like savannas, because people are always so eager to be in that kind of environment. Open space and trees, and they can look and they can see around. Yeah, it's pretty important. So the benefits of urban forests, of course, are many. So we need different approaches, different methods to really assess them. Anything from the cooling effect and air pollution reduction effect to more tricky things like the psychological and social benefits of urban forests. So we need a whole range of tools, not only from forestry, but from different fields, to understand the benefits of urban forests. So I think this is a whole new stream of research. How do we create better urban forests in a city that actually provide benefits to our people?
What Cecil said really touched me, because he made me realize that although being in nature reinforces our physical and mental health, it also provides the perfect backdrop for fulfilling our need to be with one another and sharing moments of beauty.
And luckily we see these days, and that's really something new, that the medical professionals are coming into this field and actually start understanding the importance of nature on our health and well-being. Because we need the medicine, we need the medical professionals to really give us the credibility and to give us the data for showing these benefits.
Matilda van den Bosch is a doctor and a professor at the School of Population and Public Health at the University of British Columbia. Using very precise geospatial data, Matilda and her students can identify the biodiversity of cities like Vancouver, down to knowing exactly which varieties of tree or bush species are present in each neighborhood, and then cross-reference that information with data available about public health.
We have data for Vancouver and now other cities in Canada as well that provides sort of 360-degree views of greenness as we would see it from the street. Yeah. And we can overlay this on maps of Vancouver, and we have sort of a measure of how people would experience greenness from the street all along the neighborhoods of the city. So then we can link this with data on health in early childhood as well as later in life.
That is fantastic, the kind of satellite data we are working with as well now, where we can actually go down and look at single trees and specify it particularly, because that is also what has been lacking, I think, quite a lot in the research before, that has not been really specific enough. What has usually been done in this kind of research is that you look at satellite images and then you get a kind of overall view of the greenness in a city, for example, and then you can basically tell whether it's green or it's not green. However, in this map, what is interesting here is that it has been, through different techniques, been classified, so we can look at the different species, like deciduous trees, coniferous trees, different type of grass and shrubs, and then also the impervious and built areas, surfaces. In this project, we are specifying what type of green space, what type of vegetation would actually have a specific impact on the health outcome. I think the most important there is actually the collaboration between environmental scientists, between urban planners, and from my perspective, the public health workers and agencies. The collaboration there and to increase the awareness of the knowledge across the sectors is very important.
Taking biodiversity into account in our research on nature and health is something recent. But in the short term, it should provide precious clues to urban planners who may begin choosing tree species based on their specific therapeutic benefits. When I met up with my fellow tree-bathing companions, I finally understood what they meant by receiving tree energy. Tree energy comes in the form of phytoncides, which have a positive effect on our immune system. The energy from trees has antidepressant and anti-stress qualities. Nature isn't just good for us, it's vital.
It is interesting how science has validated what the indigenous peoples always knew. Every plant here has something beneficial to offer.
There's no language, it's all about feeling, but sometimes there's a lot of love as well from the trees. And there's a lot of joy as well. I experience those things.
Coming into this forest with that opening of all the senses, it was an overwhelming experience. It was just very, very overwhelming. And it was just something that I really enjoyed experiencing.
As I reached the end of my research, I realized that children are particularly at risk for our growing disconnect with nature. Renewing the ties between children and the natural world as early as possible must be a priority. But what's the best way to tackle this problem? I then discovered forest schools. Their main goal is to encourage children to explore their environment and offer education while they're fully immersed in the forest.
Forest School is a play-based learning philosophy that takes children outdoors to play freely and to feel in their hearts that they have a place that they could go back to as they get older. If you have the time in the forest and you're allowed to explore, you're allowed to be curious, you're allowed to follow what inspires you, then I think that's how you and the forest work together. And something that I think many adults have forgotten how to do is learning how to get deep into play. And at Forest School, we give children the time and the space to do what they would like to do and to get into what we would call flow. And flow is that feeling of you're so immersed in the moment that you forget about everything around you and you just do what you love to do. It's a very, very calming thing. So if we can teach ourselves how to do that as children, and we can teach our children how to do that, then I think that's a huge gift. I think that the future of Forest School is really to become a force behind bringing nature into the city. Because children need to be able to go in nature every day, not just once a year, not just on a school field trip.
For the past 25 years, more and more studies have been providing irrefutable proof of nature's incredible powers to heal. Now, researchers will need to better understand how nature affects each of us, depending on our individual health, our senses, and our personalities.
I'm convinced that in the future, doctors will start prescribing time in the forest over pharmaceutical drugs.
Research will have very much to do in the coming years trying to understand how the relationship between nature and health can develop and how that relationship can look differently for different people in different contexts.
It's interesting to see the extent to which today's public health policies promote healthy eating habits, how they fight against excessive consumption of alcohol or tobacco, yet they're totally lackadaisical when it comes to contact with nature. I think there's an extremely promising field of work here in terms of public health policies, because at the end of the day, it will contribute to diminishing the costs of healthcare.
Green should be part of the solution, not something that comes extra at the end when everything else has been sorted and then we get maybe 0.5% or 1% of the city budget. And I think this whole health debate is really helping us to make across that point and make sure we get green spaces integrated into these major agendas and policies.
These new scientific discoveries support what native populations have known for centuries. We are interconnected with the living world, down to the deepest part of our bodies and souls.
Where I think we need to listen very much more to the knowledge which is stemming from millennia, and where this knowledge is actually existing today in the indigenous communities. And if we could collaborate more, we could reach a bigger and deeper understanding of the interconnections between the health of the environment and the health of the people.
This effect of nature experience should be brought to all people and should benefit humanity. It's only now that we're being deprived of it as we move to cities and have the decreased rates of nature exposure. We need to figure out ways to bring that back into people's lives.
Mankind has created immemorial ties with Mother Nature. We need her as much as she needs us to take better care of her and respect her. We are nature. If we destroy it, we destroy ourselves. The time has come for us to make a new pact with our living world.